Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The Orange Man is making headlines again, this time for saying that he wants to review the Smithsonian's exhibits because, as he put it, everything discussed is how horrible our country is, how bad slavery was, and how unaccomplished the downtrodden have been. Some of Trump's administration operatives wrote a letter to the Smithsonian Institute's secretary saying that their goal is to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive or partisan narratives, and restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions. Well, for the record, American slavery was a shared institution. Everybody was involved. People of all colors were there. Black people were being beaten, raped, lynched, and killed, and white people were the ones doing the beating, raping, lynching, and killing. Black people certainly weren't doing that to themselves. And this went on for hundreds of years. And all these other groups, they were also involved. They helped to uphold slavery too. Everyone from the Native Americans to the Mexicans and the Asians and such, all of these people were slave owners. All of these people were slave catchers. All of these people were supporting the peculiar institution. So American slavery was a shared cultural institution. What people resent is when you talk about what part everybody had to play in it. No matter what phony outrage you get from the white media on this issue is, the truth is they're loving it. Donald Trump is bad for democracy, as Molester Moonves said, but he's great for ratings because people are actually engaged with their favorite pretend news channel. He gives the talking heads plenty to talk about, but for anyone with an IQ higher than their shoe size, there's not much thought going on. Now, what is Donald Trump really up to? What's his real game here? He's been in the past praising Black History Month, at least in the past. This year, though, he was reported as wanting to remove black figures from the Department of Defense's historical commemorations, but then he backed down on that. Donald Trump's racism is real, especially when it comes to black people. And so is his desire to bury the Epstein files scandal under a mountain of other headlines which hopefully have nothing to do with Epstein. Ginning up controversy has also been an effective way for Trump to make the white media look the other way while he barrels through more of his so-called agenda, all of it being done under cover of chaos. At this point, you can't even say that the white media is being played like a fiddle. They're not. They know the Orange Man's game and they love to play it because it benefits them too. All right, now, what are the chances that Trump is actually able to do any of this? Hard to say right now. The Smithsonian is not an executive branch agency. It's actually a trust that was set up in the 1840s by a Brit, no less, and it's supported by federal funds. So does Donald Trump actually have the ability to control the Smithsonian's exhibits? That's a serious legal question, but as it stands for Donald Trump, it's actually a win-win scenario. If he goes to court and they crush him and show that he doesn't have the authority to curate the Smithsonian's exhibits, well, at the very least, he gave a temporary sugar rush to his base, and they'll look and say, well, at least he tried and he sent a message. On the other hand, if it's litigated in court and a judge actually says, well, he does have the authority to curate the Smithsonian's exhibits, well, then he can look at his base and say, see, I'm getting things done. It's not going to change their lives, but it's not meant to. It's meant to change Trump's life by getting attention off of Epstein. Black history, however, is the real issue here. And why is it that there's not actually a defense against what Trump's attacks are doing? That's because black history has been under relentless assault by Republican politicians for years now. That's not new. The problem isn't that the GOP is being typically racist. The problem is that Democrats, who claim to be so concerned, they are not and have utterly refused to make an issue out of defending black history being taught in schools or preserved in the public square. Neither the Democrats nor their on-air or online mouthpieces are treating any of this as the political and historical crisis that they claim to want you to think that it is. Instead, they're just twiddling their thumbs about it. Where are the Democrats who are promising to gut every bit of censorious GOP legislation that tries to whitewash history? Where are they at? Where's the Democrats at who are running on a platform of reinforcing the teaching of black history? If they actually do believe that teaching the history of slavery in America is an important part of the American story, then where are they at to say that we're going to stand up for it no matter what? They call themselves removing it over the GOP. The next time the Democrats are in charge, we're going to reinforce it. Well, they're not there. They're not saying anything. And that inaction tells you everything. While you have the left corner of the white media pointing out that Trump wants to focus on feel-good history for white people, the real question is, why aren't Democrats running on a platform to not only resist these specific policies, but to also promise that they will reinforce and expand the teaching of slavery? You push, we push back harder. Where are they to do that on this issue? Instead, they're just giving the usual tisk-tisk about the orange man's latest performative extremism. Well, that's meaningless. For the last several years, we've seen this in places like Florida, Texas, and Louisiana, the iron triangle of stupid. Democrats just let trash like DeSantis do whatever he wanted, and Democrats did nothing to retaliate or to make reversing these policies a key part of their party platform. And then we have the shills, suck-ups, and sellouts who tell us that we have to vote Democrat because of this. Okay, and what have the Democrats said that they're going to do about any of these anti-black policies? Donald Trump hasn't removed any exhibits from the Smithsonian or anything, but if he does, will Democrats promise to restore them and promise to expand them? By allowing attacks on black history, Democrats are also giving a wink and a nod as the historical basis for reparations and our other social justice claims are also under attack. Democrats are doing that deliberately. No matter what they may say publicly, they do not want to have to do pathetic gestures like housing vouchers and all of the other phony reparations gestures that they've done because the grassroots isn't fooled by this. And the more that the Democrats pretend to do reparations, like the giving back of Bruce's Beach, etc., the greater the chances become that they will eventually be forced into a real debate about doing real reparations. So Democrats want this issue to be buried altogether. And that starts with letting the Republicans do the dirty work of burying the history. Democrats are fully in favor of that. And on a side note, you got one of the main tethers in the Congressional Immigrant Caucus, Richie Torres. He was acting like he was standing up to Jillian Michaels on CNN. What a joke. You got a tether calling himself speaking about American slavery, which nobody in his lineage had anything to do with, and he himself, you can count on one hand the number of times he's even talked about the issue. But this is who the white media puts on camera to stick up for teaching slavery in America's museums. End of rant on that one. But the point is, I'm not seeing anything from the Democrats but the same old shaking their empty heads and saying that mean old Trump, and this is why you need to vote for Democrats. Well, over here, we don't vote for nothing. I need to know what I'm going to get for my vote. You gotta tell me. And what the Democrats have told me is nothing. Democrats are so dedicated to doing absolutely nothing for black people, to maintaining the policy of benign neglect. They're so dedicated to making sure that they don't even mention us, that even when talking about preserving slavery exhibits in the Smithsonian, Democrats don't dare say that they're going to lift a finger to preserve black history. 3 generations ago, both parties embarked on a strategy of benign neglect. And this is what it looks like. This is what it is. That's the reason why back in 2015, in the dying days of the Obama administration, just before the election that Hillary lost, at the height of the BLM protest, there was that leaked memo from the DNC that was made public, where they were telling Democrat politicians how to dodge and evade the demands that were coming from these activists. Quote, listen to their concerns. Don't offer support for concrete policy positions. There it is. Pretend to be sympathetic. Let these little black people here tell you their concerns, but don't offer to support anything. They tell you a policy that they want, do not promise to support it. This is benign neglect. Pretend to be sympathetic, but in reality you're just waiting for them to finish speaking so that you can go reassure the local police union that they're going to get as much money and guns to kill black people as they want, and that there will be no laws passed to finally rein in these savages. And these were the people who were putting on kente cloth after George Floyd was murdered, and who told you and me that they care so much about black people and their hearts bleed for us. Oh, they're just so anti-racist, right? Well, as Noam Chomsky said, it's the most sophisticated form of propaganda when something presents itself as opposition, when in reality it's actually support. The Democrats' position is actually no different than what you would expect from a so-called moderate, quote-unquote, Republican. And I know that in the GOP, moderate is a loaded term, but by that I mean a Republican who doesn't immediately start defending slavery in the first 5 seconds. That seems to be what qualifies as moderate in the GOP these days. But if you talk to a Tim Scott or a Darrell Issa about police violence, those guys wouldn't lecture you about police do a dangerous job, but if you told either of them that there need to be policies put in place to punish the police and to remove qualified immunity, those two guys wouldn't so much as even hint that they would ever support anything like that. They would politely listen and then tell you that everyone's opinion has value, etc., and they want safer streets and police need more and better training, etc., but they're not going to say a thing about any actual policies. Now, how is that any different than what the Democrats do? If you're not talking about punishing the police, if you're not pushing legislation to do that, if you're not instructing agencies that you want that done, then you're just wasting our time. And the same thing goes for these GOP attacks on Black history. Democrats have had several years and successive controls of Congress to show what they'll do on this issue at both the federal and state levels, and they won't even take a stand on it. Where's even one Democrat at to promise to yank federal funding from any state or school district that removes Black history, or tries to whitewash it, or tries to otherwise defend slavery in any shape, form, or fashion? Where are they at to do that? Where's the Democrats who will use the power of the purse and every federal office they have to punish Republicans for these kind of maneuvers? They've had several years to do it and haven't done it anywhere, not even once. That's how you know that Democrats are actually in favor of these moves. The two major parties are both wings on the same white supremacist vulture. Republicans do the dirty work that Democrats can't. When Democrats get in office, they just start telling Black folks all the things they can't do for us. Now, two good things will come out of all this. First of all, people are going to see that white supremacy is on the march and that they cannot wish it away or hit the political snooze button by voting for Democrats or try to ignore the bad guys into disappearing. You're going to have to actually fight them and get off your butt and do that. Secondly, people are seeing that Democrats aren't going to do anything about these Republican attacks, and that's going to have people looking at the Democrats with fresh eyes for the first time in their entire lives. Democrats will yell about how mean Republicans are, but not one of them will talk about crafting policies to punish the GOP for it, or about reversing these policies. They'll try to BS their way past the voters with a bunch of hot air and empty rhetoric. That's what Kamala Harris tried to do. On everything from reparations to punishing police to the genocide in Gaza, she would express phony sympathy, but she wasn't about to take a concrete position, especially not for the policies that the grassroots voters are demanding. Oh, I'm sorry. In actuality, she did take a solid position on reparations. She said, I'm not going to do anything that's only going to benefit Black people. No! And she wasn't alone. Bernie Sanders said, reparations, that's not feasible. Elizabeth Warren, she said, reparations for what? So the Democrats have taken concrete policy positions on reparations. They are solidly against it. And if they're against reparations, which they are, that also means that they're solidly against teaching the historical basis for reparations. They too would like to see the issue of slavery fade from the American consciousness, because the Democrats, like the Republicans, also hope to escape reparations. Now, they can't say that publicly, but they don't have to. They let the Republicans say it for them. Democrats have made it crystal clear that the people will have to force changes onto the system, and that Democrats will do nothing to help. And if that's the case, then what the hell will we look like voting for them? You want to make the orange man the bad guy here? That's fine. That's his brand, and I got no problem with heaping scorn on him. My question is, who's the Democrat hero that you're supposed to be counting on to come to the rescue? Which one of them has said that they're even going to? Because if you're really going to overlook that fact, then Donald Trump's not the only one desperately trying to forget the past. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Chris Baker, D. Sherrod, E. Rock, Jacques Hargett, and Julia Ragland. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.